What do you think would need to happen for humanity to be really ready for ETs? What kind of steps do you think we need to take? And we hear a lot about raising your vibration. What are some of the very practical steps we need to take? Then let's start with Adam, please.
Sure, that sounds great. Really, really good question. In my perspective, the sort of critical mass of humanity being ready in the sense that if a widespread extraterrestrial presence showed up, came down, started engaging, started in landing, just with pods at first, then extending to the masses. I think honestly, we've been ready for something that great of a change since 2005. However, it's not really just about the masses. It's about the fact that we have right now certain military industrial complexes that are obsessed with controlling this planet. And the reality is that our galactic family is here to ensure we don't destroy ourselves. But there is a transition phase that we're in where the people, the ambassadors, those who are choosing to represent humanity and to pave the way for a peaceful and regenerative future for us all, must actually rise into that planetary stewardship. If we're simply saved by some off world species, then we are put in a position where they become our angels, our gods, and those that would be worshipped by many humans. And as you know, humanity doesn't really get down with that. We end up rebelling against our gods. We end up revolting and creating a lot of problems. And we've seen that already happen on this planet on multiple occasions before first contact protocols actually existed here. And so there is a major need for us to rise on our own and actually step forward in stewardship of our own planet to join this galactic community on equal footing as a species in balance and harmony with the rest of this galactic council.
What do you think we would need, or what would need to happen for humanity to be really ready for contact with ETs? Are there steps we can take now to get ready? We hear a lot about raising your vibration. What are some very practical steps?
Well, yes, it is what Sheila said because Sheila has raised her vibration. She and everyone here is, but humans are very strange people, or strange beings. They're like, we look at this election coming out. I'm not going to get political, but everyone believes they have the answer, or they know what's right, or their person or their baseball team or whatever is is the right thing. And we get attached to these exterior labels and identify with them as if they're us. And I think whatever's out there is helping us transcend these very limited ways of identification. You think you're your history or your family or your lineage or your thoughts, and these cover up the I am presence that we are, which is eternal. So I think first understanding our eternal nature, because that's where we're going to meet these beings on an even playing field, right? Like Adam said, we're not going to worship them. They're not going to save us. The only thing we need to save ourselves from ourselves. So we have to understand who we are as eternal, immortal, forever beings, because that's the level of consciousness that's coming here to help wake us up for who we are. But we have to be a little bit awake to even recognize that something's coming. So it's a matter of shifting our thought processes. It really is. To meet these beings, we have to get over the limitation that has kept humanity in a box of enslavement, and by others and by ourselves. And we need to think new thoughts and understand new realities in a sense where we need to perceive other levels of awareness. Perception is the key. So we need to understand what perception is and see, a fish does not see it's in water. Well, we're in water, or whatever you want to call it. And when we lift our heads out of it, we do see these bigger realities, and that's when these other beings can meet us on an even playing field.
Mm.
I have a lot more to say, but that's it.
Yeah, I would love to just add a little bit of
Yeah.
a cherry on top of that, Alan, because when you say, it's about perception, you're absolutely right. And one of the most important things about perception in relationship to this second question, which is how do we raise our vibration enough to be a part of the galactic community? I actually look at it differently than that. I would say that from a perception standpoint, it's not about raising your and raising and raising and raising your vibration. It's actually about bandwidth and integration, meaning we have to be just as accepting of everything that's low vibration as much as everything that's high vibration. And I like to use the metaphor of music because everybody can relate to the idea that you don't really ever like listening to music that's just high piercing sounds. You want music that's got bass, it's got mids, it's got highs. And life is a journey like that, full of bass notes and mid notes and high notes. And when we start kind of repressing or rejecting the low frequency stuff to try to always stay positive in the high frequency, what happens is we end up crashing. And so the practice of, I believe, really integrating in a way that the galactic community does, it means taking everything for what it is, embracing the most dark shadows of our own species and humanity so that we can reconcile them, so that we can alchemize that pain and turn it into beauty and grace.
I agree with that, Adam, but I think we've also, the other side of that is that we've already so indulged in low frequency, lifetime after lifetime. We've all suffered, and I think something else is possible. Without denying what you're saying, we need to embrace it, own it, and realize that maybe we don't have to repeat that.
I would love to add to this.
I agree.
Because I've been
Me
diving
too.
into the mathematical aspect of this, which Adam, I'm sure you'll appreciate. Really put simply, when you take mathematics and dimensions to go from the one dimension to the two dimension. So the 0 dimension is a dot, the 1 dimension is a line, the second dimension is a square, and then you make that into a cube in the 3D. But you try and make me a cube without any lines or squares, it's impossible. But at the same time, the line dissolves within what is actually the new formation. So I think there's truth in what both of you are saying, in that we're going to dissolve the lower vibrations, that square is no longer going to be there, but it's now part of the new formation. And I think that's where we need to start placing our vision, is what is that new creation, without ditching, without bypassing, but how do we include it and also build something else with that?
Right. And realizing with all of these things that we have these octaves of vibration still within a singularity of a frequency. So we can embrace the entirety of a frequency and all of those octaves. And as we learn and as humanity heals and as we're able to embrace those shadow aspects, we still begin to move up within these frequency bands. And so I think that everything that we've all said really adds to the richness of these questions that you're asking.
Yeah, I just want to say you're right, Adam. In some ways, a lot of people I'm thinking about are spiritual bypassers. No, they don't want to go there, and that's, we need to embrace the pain, suffering, and hard times we've all had, and also see something else. But there's an epidemic of that other stuff, and so
Yeah,
it's
I'm in full agreement with all of you, actually. So I appreciate you speaking to what I shared in a way that further unpacks this for people, because it is important that we understand what we mean when we say we want to sustain at a higher vibrational octave, for example. And what that means is a baseline of our lives actually is in a more full and rich and beautiful realm of experience where we don't have to be creating more and more karmas and suffering more and more. So and yet, if you want to experience that, you do need to face and integrate whatever pains, whatever traumas you haven't yet. And when I look at most of humanity, we've got a little bit of work to do, and it's okay. It's ceremonial, it's alchemical, it's part of this journey of transmutation into becoming a galactic species.
What ethical issues should we consider when meeting beings from other worlds, especially if they see things very differently from us?
You as a soul are choosing your experience. So you decide when your sovereignty is given away and when it's not. Now, that's, as a frame, a very difficult frame for someone who's gone through a lot of trauma. And I've gone through trauma in my life. And I had to both learn how to integrate and heal that trauma, as well as develop the capacity to move from the victim state to the owning of the reality that I created that for my life's journey to be who I am now. Now, on the other side, in terms of ethics of extraterrestrials themselves, I've met many, people with different kinds of encounters, and ones abducted by grays, for example, which is what you're pointing to very specifically. Stan Romanek, great example, right? Stan's written all these books about the grays, and they came, and he always talks about it like it's really spooky, and they came to his house and they abducted him, and all these things happen. But after I listened to Stan, I could see inside his soul stream, he was gray. He was a Zeta Reticuli. And I went over and afterwards, and I was like, so do you ever reveal to people that you're actually from there and that's who you are? And he's like, how did you know? Like, don't let people, like he was keeping it quiet for himself in his journey of rising in his fame as this sort of abductee and contactee. But as you evolve, you start to realize that oftentimes you have contracts with these species and or these beings that you've come from these worlds. And when I look at the situation of the Zeta Reticuli as a whole on this planet, what I mostly see is a species recovering from a galactic war a very long time ago, in which being able to experiment with and relate with their own souls who have incarnated as humans as a massive healing process to that ancient trauma. That's actually how it all rolls out. And then you end up with also 80 to 90% of the information that's released, especially from whistleblowers and et cetera, just as Stephen Greer says, 80 to 90% of that stuff is disinformation. And it's designed to drive us towards a desire for space-based weapons, which was Werner von Braun's last statements on his deathbed, that they would use extraterrestrial threat as a mechanism to build weapon systems. And I can say for sure in my own experience that the galactic community is got ethics out the wazoo, like the highest level of conscious awareness and connection and desire for every people, every culture to have its sovereignty and its beauty and have an opportunity to exchange and meet each other. And as far as on Earth, my last thing I'll say is just, I think principles like open source within the technology community is a really beautiful example of an ethical approach to IP and knowledge and how we create things that's very in line with the galactic species out there. When you give away your greatest insights, nobody has to fight over those technologies anymore. You're making sure everybody's staying caught up with each other. And we definitely are seeing the greatest movements around that in, for example, AI right now, that the open source work in that space is decentralizing its power and giving its power to everyone, no matter what level of device you have. And that's really important for us as we go forward, is to equalize and balance our distribution of power on this planet. Absolutely. Adam. Yeah, I was just going to say, I used Stan, Romanek as an example. And I mean, I think his entire life imploded. The guy's convicted of all kinds of stuff, and it's kind of horrible, but it's a really clear example of like, if you're lying to people and lying to yourself in whatever ways, or trying to present yourself as something that you're not to people, you're going to carry that weight, and it's going to act like a rubber band, and it's going to get more and more intense until finally that time stream, as you might call it, where you're trying to branch a false reality off your own timeline, it's going to collapse back in. because it has to. You're not that false thing. And this is very true of, you know, looking at past traumas and people's experience, where they've created a new story in their head about what happened, but that new story never actually meets who they are right now. So it's the acknowledgement and acceptance of what's actually happened in their lives that's the first and most powerful step of the healing, because they actually begin to embrace their real, true journey, no matter how, you know, lively or painful it might have been. And so we need to get honest as a species about our past as well.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean,
and like I said before, you know, the Zetas in their case, you know, being part of a galactic war where they had a technological gift given to them to install chips in the back of their heads to enable them to access a hive mind and be able to fight together in this galactic war, and were used as a militarized army to fight against the hybrids, the dragon humanoid hybrids that we call reptilians or draconians. And because they were rolling across the galaxy with robot armies and massive fleets, essentially taking out planets. And the galactic community around these different planets did not know what to do about that. They did not have the warriors and the martial artists and the Jedi to face that. And so this recruitment was, you know, done, I think, by a soul that was probably one of these ancient dragon lords who got pulled away from Andromeda to this galaxy, incarnated unconsciously, and had all of this rage about having their genetics stolen and DNA stolen. This is a lot of the content of my book, The Dragon Key, which is available at thedragonkey.com, and the Amazon version will be ready shortly. I'm releasing it this month. And, you know, the healing process that it takes for a species to go through something like that is massive. And then it's also important to recognize that just like humanity, there is no black and white about any species or race in the galaxy. There are beings of many different levels of consciousness among every species and among every race. All that being said, there is very clearly a galactic community that is for the most part, helping to regulate the development of planets across this galaxy. And you can see very clearly their influence because our beautiful, wealthy, luscious planet has not been raided and taken by some advanced species with great technologies. And the fact that that's true already right there tells you a lot about the ethics level at a baseline of the species that are visiting here, because we are still living on this planet, generally freely having our experience, doing our thing as humans. And if a species truly wanted to take this planet from us with their technology level versus ours, they could do it easily overnight. And I think that's where some of these stories break down. And I hear Corey Good and David Wilcock talking about the Navy having an advanced extraterrestrial group that's like fighting against aliens on some other planets and protecting the Earth. And frankly, it's complete BS, because I've talked to those species. I've had many contact experiences with them, and they laugh and they're like, no, you guys are quarantined to your own solar system. You're not even allowed beyond your own solar system right now. Like, yeah, you built reproduction tech, but you're not going anywhere because you guys are still rolling out onto the galaxy as a militarized force. And we're not going to allow that to come and disturb our beautiful, generally peaceful, complete, you know, utopia-like planets where we can use replicators to render any kind of physical material we need, because we don't need your gold. Sorry, we just realign some molecules in the fabric of space and we have it. So there's a lot of interesting misunderstandings out there. And I think it's important for us to delve deeper into these concepts together to better understand our relationships here. Yeah, well, I met Corey Good at Contact in the Desert some years ago, and I was excited to meet him actually and to talk to him and find out what his experience was like. And he was completely drunk and was like acting like he was ready to assault me and start a fight with me. And I was just, you know, meeting him for the first time, saying hi, like, how's it going? So, you know, we can see that there are people that have significant trauma out there that haven't healed from that. And when they go through very intense traumas, and what I don't doubt that he went through trauma in the military, and the recovery from that is a really difficult process. But we have to use those inner senses, like you're saying, Eesha, where we need to use that inner compass around where is the truth resonating, and where do we feel that like heavy condensed pressure that's like triggering, because usually that means there's probably some other stuff in there.
Exactly. It's we're locked into a very small picture and the universe is wide open. So I'm curious what you think about, Adam, about this calibration of stars and its relationship to consciousness and the interface with communicating with other beings.
Yeah, sure. I'll start there and I can speak to that very briefly and then unpack some of this. How do you make contact exploration? Every star is a different set of frequencies. So that set of frequencies, and I mean physically, you look at a star, it's got a different spectrum. Every star has a different spectrum. And the spectrum is actually based on its composition. How much iron does it have and carbon does it have, and you know how much hydrogen is burning versus helium at this stage, etc. So we're getting this rainbow that's coming out of every star, and every star's rainbow is a very specific frequency set that influences the development of life on the planets around that star. So there are archetypal connections to certain star systems based on the frequency of the stars. One example that's very easy to talk about is the Pleiades, because in the Pleiades, you have a group of what we perceive as a massive set of very young stars within a nebula that hold to a very blue realm frequency. However, the more I've delved into and gotten to know different species and had memories from the past, I've also become aware that at a certain stage, very advanced species can actually help contain and leverage the frequency of their star, and in fact help to balance that frequency over a very long period of time. And for example, if you look at the frequency of the star Maya, if you actually look at its energetic pulse frequencies, it's one of the most amazing stars in our entire galaxy. It's a perfect sine wave. And not every star is like that. Most stars are this whole very complex thing, but the signals from Maya in the Pleiadian star system are so regular and perfect, it seems as though it could have been engineered that way. And in my assessments, I believe that Maya, being the home star of the water planet that I incarnated on as a Pleiadian and many of my friends, that they did learn to engineer the star, and they've kept some of that star group looking very young, even though they're much older than they actually are, which is just a wild concept, especially as a physicist and an astrophysicist. Now, in terms of making contact and exploring contact experiences, one of the places I like to start is looking at how important it is to get grounded. I used to say, if you want to connect with the stars, build a medicine wheel on the earth. And it was doing a lot of work with indigenous elders and youth, doing these prayer runs for world peace and getting deeply grounded in my body and in my connection to the earth. That was the first key piece of my contact experiences and opening that up for me. Now, the Merkaba work that Eesha was talking about, I've had experiences around that since I was a teenager, but the morning that I actually met the Galactic Council, as I was running across the desert, my Merkaba was spinning up and it vibrated up until it was a piercingly high frequency. And I could feel this entire field spreading out around me. And then suddenly I was sustained in that field, projected out of my body, and ended up in this giant galactic council chamber with 73 different ambassadors of different species from across the galaxy, which changed my life, obviously, in profound ways. And you can learn about that story on Gaia. I did this big, long interview with Ruben Langdon and his show Interviews with Ed, if you want to hear that whole story. But the vehicle of our energy bodies, learning how to manage that vehicle, has everything to do with our capacity to astral travel, to bilocate, to be able to more easily express communication at a telepathic level. It's a very kind of critical part of this journey. And there are a lot of challenges and roadblocks that you might run into along the way. And I will say that, you know, even as someone who woke up at 15 and now being 42 years old, I still enter cycles of new transformation and new karmic stuff I'm working with and new things I have to alchemize. It's not like you just kind of skip into the infinite eternal aspect of yourself and then you're in avatar mode from then on. I'm a lot better at entering avatar mode when I want to, whenever I want to. You get really good at that. But you're still going to be needing to work with the human aspects of what it means to be on this planet, to be in a collective that's going through a lot of trauma and pain, and stay in relationship to people and to the dynamics of change that are occurring. So all of that is actually important for our contact experiences to stabilize, because we need to have our hearts that open to loving where we're at as a people, loving the human aspect of us, and expanding ourselves and opening ourselves through deeper energetic work to actually, you know, the potential that we have as these incredible super beings that have so much magic inside of us that very few of us have woken up. I think that in general, I'm going to just go on the sovereignty point here, because it'll also address some of the questions that are coming up on YouTube and in the chat around how do we protect ourselves. Look, you know, there are beings out there who have a lot of trauma on all kinds of levels, whether that's, you know, within a large scale system that they've been behind developing, or are, you know, individual spirits, beings. I think a lot of people's dark extraterrestrial experiences aren't even coming from beings on other planets. They're just spirits on this planet who like to play games and mess with people. If you've ever been to Bali, you know, there's a lot of really intense and very powerful spirits there. I had friends that had to go through a curse clearing over several years after doing a ceremony in a place they shouldn't have been doing it. And in a way they shouldn't have been doing it, and really horrible things were happening. So we need to have one really deep respect for the sacred and for places and for magic and for consciousness. And two, we need to understand that we are always as powerful as we choose to be. If we allow that we are fully sovereign individuals, and we see that we are within a circle, and we set the field of what that circle is and what it allows and what it doesn't, it's called warding and casting a circle. And I train about this in the Guardian Alliance, but you can program your circle to allow in certain kinds of experiences and to essentially keep other kinds of experiences out of that circle. And it's very, very effective. And you also have to get to know what kind of unconscious drives you may still be operating from, aspects of your psyche that might be addicted to certain kinds of drama or conflicts that you're not even fully aware of yet. So as you clean up the space around your inner heart center, as Eesha put it, you get better at setting a circle that actually calls in the kinds of experiences that you want and keeps others from it. Now, when I've had experiences where clearly an entity's coming in to mess with me, I think it's a joke. To me, it's like I'm an angel and they're this being who's traumatized, and they've got all their stuff they're hanging on to, and they're coming trying to project scary stuff at me. And I'm like, oh, you poor thing. You're like so caught up in that story from your old wound. And then they're like shocked. They don't know what to do. You know, and I'll often use mirroring as well. There's an ancient magical technique called the divine trine, where you surround a being in a divine triangle form that reflects to them their self, other, and higher perspective. And all of a sudden, they're caught in a space where it's like, you know, when if you've ever gone on stage or something and you suddenly became really self-conscious, oh, and you don't know what to do because you're like so self-conscious. Isn't that an interesting phrase? Isn't that an interesting term? Well, we can help beings that are going through deep struggle become self-conscious. And we do have to establish our self-awareness and self-consciousness of our sovereignty in order to deal with these kinds of things. And for myself, doing that has helped me navigate major disinformation campaigns that have been being rolled out on this planet quite significantly, especially over the last, 8 years or so. And you can see how much these disinformation campaigns have driven people to fight against each other, to reject each other. They've divided all of these conscious communities, alternative awareness communities. And, the next thing you know, with some very, very dense psychological programming, you end up with people who think the earth is flat and are willing to aggressively fight you to defend that belief. Even if you tell them you've got friends that have visited Antarctica, even if you point out that the driving time in Australia is the same as in North America and the United States between two places, even if you show them all of the science, the sense of disconnection is really, it's fed. It's you can see when people are being fed a story that then makes them feel special for knowing it and makes them fight to protect the ego that they've now latched around that false story.
You're talking about religion then. That is religion.
And that is religion. And that's exactly my point, Alan, is that that's exactly the driver that was used to slaughter women across Europe, millions of women, for being herbalists, for being naturopaths, for understanding how to heal. But the problem was they were part of tribes that were not part of the Roman Empire and or were not part of, the Christian empires that rolled in later. And you can see that in North America, with the movement of, the white men and the different groups that traveled across to take indigenous lands. You can see it going back in all these different points in history, even in ancient Egypt, where during the time of Akhenaten, the military of General Horemheb was using Akhenaten and then Tutankhamun as an excuse to go slaughter the Nubians and take their gold. It's like this game has happened over and over again. So we have to be watchful and take the sovereignty over our own conscious process to recognize, are we being pushed to divide and to hate each other and to fight each other through this new insight that you're getting? And if so, maybe we should question that narrative. Because if we actually want peace and healing on the planet, we're going to need to start really deeply accepting each other's beliefs, accepting each other's backgrounds, accepting each other's journeys, and accepting all of the amazing work that's already been done before us. Like, for example, the 500 years of science that's proved the earth is round, or the millions of books in all the libraries that prove that the Tartaria thing, advanced civilization in the 1850s, is not true. Because otherwise, we're believing that everyone's lying to us. And when that happens, you start isolating yourself. And when you start isolating yourself and believing that everyone is against you, that's when you're the most controllable. And that's exactly what happened with, Hitler in the time of Germany, is he isolated and divided and created a condition where everybody suddenly was on board with slaughtering an entire, group of people. So we have to be very careful about this stuff. And in fact, it's so ridiculous to me that people would use that as and be like, well, you're either 5D or 3D. And if you're 3D, you're going to hell. And if you're 5D, you're going to heaven. I mean, it's a very old story, right? And the reality is that, that judgment is the main problem, actually. And also from a physics standpoint, you don't get 5-dimensional anything without the full inclusion of the 3D inside of it. Every dimension adds on dimensions. So, you know, that's a ludicrous concept that you're going to enter the 5D and leave the 3D. That's just not even there's nothing about that that's even real at all. And then, you know, in terms of timelines and bifurcation of world view experiences, I actually have a very firm belief at this stage, after lots and lots of trial and error and experimentation and memory, that we are in a consistent timeline with each other. All of us are, that the flow of experience is consistent. And what that means is that the experiences that I had back when I was arriving on this planet, the experiences I had in ancient Egypt, the experiences I had in Japan, you know, a long time ago in another life, all of those experiences have led me to who I am now. There's never been a split away from the journey that I am. And the causal relationships that I've had along the way, meaning the people that I've met, the people I have connections to, I still have those connections. I still have those relationships. So I'm not isolated to my own dream entirely that's completely separate from everybody else's dream and only experiencing my own isolated reality. I'm experiencing a reality in flow and in conjunction with lots of other infinite eternal beings who all have their own individuation and their own individual experience. And so I don't actually look at it like there's infinite physical timelines that all can branch and exist in multiple planes and you can jump timelines. I think that's ludicrous. I think that what's actually going on is that on an astral level, in the higher planes of existence, from the astral up, which is the mental plane up, you can imagine infinite variations. Now, that doesn't mean that those infinite variations are going to collapse and become the reality you're experiencing, but you have the power of choosing which ones do come into your experience now and going into the future. You are crafting your journey of reality in this exact present moment and shaping the potential reality as you go forward. But that doesn't break anything. There's total consistency with that, with everything in your past. And back to what we were saying earlier, you know, imagining that something different happened in your past in order to experience a different emotion around it, that's valuable. But don't mistake that with the idea that the past actually changed, because then you're in bypassing and you're ignoring the truth of what you actually experienced. Because if you didn't experience that, you'd never be in the healing experience in the first place to look back at that moment. So hello, that timeline has to stay consistent in order to avoid that paradox. And there's so much beauty in accepting the journey that what we've been on and what we've experienced is actually what we've experienced. There's a huge amount of faith and solidity and logical consistency to that that just makes reality more fun to play with, I think.
Right. So we're living in the parallel earth right now. If you have a foot in both worlds, and
Right.
you need to, because you have to pay your rent and do that. But there's also this other dialogue of this other earth, this other cosmos, this other state of being that maybe it will catch on in a bigger way. It already has to some degree, and maybe we'll all get on that starship, Adam. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, I've asked a lot of people that question, Alan, that would never, ever watch this panel or think any of this would be interesting or real. The people that are the most anti-woo, you could say, imaginable, that, you know, laugh at a lot of this community because they're very earthy, grounded people. And when you really get down to the logic of it, the reality is that, yeah, if there was a starship they could get on and fly to another planet, yeah, that's more interesting than Netflix tonight. Of course I'm going to do that. Like, it's a duh for them. It's just that they don't see the potential reality of that occurring. And I think that that's part of the importance as we're closing this, you know, this time together, to land for the people that have been watching this whole journey about an ET embassy. It's the anchoring of the reality that we are in a time of contact with extraterrestrial family that's been going on for a very long time, by the way, but we are formalizing the need to actually establish an embassy that has its own sovereign space within the boundaries of a country to provide a space where extraterrestrial contact and direct relationships can happen and be cultivated without the massive bureaucracy of any nation state getting involved. That there's a free and open space for humanity and the people as a whole to open up to Star Family and exchange with them. And that is a critical part of this bridging process. And yeah, you know, I think it's hilarious because of how much disclosure has actually already happened. How many people now really just kind of take it for granted? Like, yeah, duh, we're not alone. Of course, we're not alone. But what does that mean for my life? Well, I'd just like to, you know, impart to people that, well, in the very near future, one of the things it means is that you'll go out to get in your car and you can go spend the, you know, a sunrise in the Pleiades, you know, go have lunch in the middle of the night in the Syrian system in a tree city, then head to Japan and pick up some sushi on your way home, you know, and get back home, you know, before sunset and, you know, have a day across worlds. Like, this is the future that's coming. And we need to start looking at how beautiful and exquisite that is and how worth it is to work out our issues, our differences, and to find that peace with each other as a planet, because we're in this amazing growth phase into a new civilization.
Well, one thing I just want to add to that, Adam, is the people who would get on that starship are the ones that are trying to escape. And what's so important about the earlier conversations we had is that we're not escaping. We've grounded. We've experienced that. We've gone through it. So it's not, we're not escaping. We're here for another adventure, not to leave the old incomplete modes behind. So it's about owning the human experience in all its dark, light, heavy, insane parts. And yes, there's a starship waiting. You know, it's like that.
I'll get on board. I'll see you there. I'll be waiting.
Yeah.
Bags packed, ready to go.
That's right.
You too.
I'm ready.
There's the captain right there. He's going to take out his starship.
Make it so.
Coming soon. If I can help it, that's coming soon.
Okay.
Awesome.
So final words from each of you, please. Adam?
Yeah, I just want to thank all of you for spending the time to listen to this content today and to be a part of this event and this experience. I sincerely hope that you support the project with the embassy and reach out to friends, reach out to family, introduce them to concepts. One of my earliest journeys was being invited as a speaker at the White House in the United Nations by a guy who knew I'd had these extraterrestrial experiences and wanted me to go in and ask questions to get some of these young philanthropists and leaders from around the world thinking about some of these harder questions and to see where they were at. And I learned a lot from that. And I invite people to do that with their community, because you know, the worst thing that can happen is that they blow you off and they don't want to talk about that topic. But if you can open it up and ask curiously, you know, what do you actually think about crop circles? What do you actually think about this disclosure thing where the Pentagon said that they recovered off-world vehicles? What do you think that means? Starting those conversations, I think, is really great and important for our communities and will help expand this knowledge and this awareness to more people. So thank you all so much for coming. I'm Adam Apollo, adamapollo.com. You can find me there. And my book that's just being published, but you can get in on the online subscription too for the full media rich and audiobook versions at thedragonkey.com. Thanks so much.